Welcome to the To Be Honest podcast. Today, I am pleased to invite Ruben Escalante to the podcast. Ruben is the studio manager and program mentor at DMC Studio, a program of MACLA, a community-based arts organization, as well as an art curator for Emo Kids of Color Art Collective. Welcome, Ruben.
Hello.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It's been pretty warm where I live, and just today, I woke up and there was frost in the car. I usually wake up and have to get a latte or something, so I was wearing t-shirt and shorts. I had to change real quick. It was
Yeah, it went from summer to fall in 2 seconds. I know, I'm in a sweater right now, so if that tells you anything.
Yeah, definitely.
So I want to start talking about your experience with mental health and your experience as the studio manager and program mentor at DMC Studio. So would you mind sharing a bit about what that is, as well as what your role is?
So this is I'm going into my third year as it's basically like a studio coordinator. So I create the year-long fiscal year programs around youth engagement. It's more specifically it's like digital arts for youth. I'm more of a more traditional art. I love using more. I just like using my hands more. So we do offer more traditional arts too. We kind of now it's more of just a art studio, a free art studio for youth.
Oh, that's awesome. And anyone can participate, or is it for specific youth in the area?
We try to open it up, I think part of what I see as being some issues in our country right now is the lack of diversity and understanding. So I really try to be open with who we allow in this space. I think typically we focus on underserved youth, but I know that there's an importance to be able to have people or have youth from all kind of neighborhoods be there. So there's more understanding, and you could see other youth can see what's going on in other youth's lives. So we do open it up.
Oh, that's great. And can you explain a bit about what MACLA is? Because DMC Studio is a part of that, but I don't know if everyone knows what MACLA is.
So MACLA is a Latinx. It started off as mainly an art gallery studio. Now we still have the gallery, but there's also a performance element too, where we bring in Latinx artists from all over really, to come in and perform. But my specific area is within the youth program. We're actually going to be changing the name. This is the first time I'm really talking about it openly. To the Teen Tech Center at MACLA. And what that means is we're partnering with Best Buy, along with the Clubhouse Network, which originated from MIT's Media Lab. And we're also partnering with Google to really facilitate and become mentors in the space and offer our youth mentorship and also other opportunities with scholarships and possibly endless amounts of resources. But yeah.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like you guys are really booming right now.
It really started to take off. We've been in conversation with them about doing everything for probably a little over a year now. It started a while to start, the whole renovation started. It took a long time to start. But once it did, once we were about to get started, that's when COVID hit. So we had to wait a bit. But really maybe July, I think it was early July, we started renovation. Renovation's completely done. Right now we're ordering the new technology and furniture and having to upgrade our internet Wi-Fi, but we're almost done. We're looking to have our soft opening mid-November.
Okay, so that's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Cool. And what role does DMC Studio play in our community?
So I think for myself, I was always kind of I don't want to say a loner, because there's a negative like vibe with that. But I mean, I grew up just kind of like daydreaming a lot, and like for as long as I remember, it was always kind of tough for me to like be social and make friends initially. Um, so for me, it was always like writing or drawing or just like playing with toys. So I was always really creative, and you know, I guess growing up, I grew up in the Central Valley, which is mainly like fields, and there's no real connection to the arts, like, in those areas people work, and that's their main focus is like working and, you know, providing for their families. And there's just not like a real connection to it, like when we would go on field trips, we would visit museums, but from the beginning, we were always told, like, be quiet, don't touch anything. Like, you have to be on your best behavior. And as a kid, you're just like, this is boring, And so I don't know. So it was kind of like two separate worlds, where I felt really a part of this creative world, but then I also felt detached from it, like not truly connected to it. Not until going to film school. I was working in real estate for a while, and I was able to like provide, like make a life for myself, but I couldn't stand just like working in an office, like it felt like there was another part of me just like looking at myself like, what are you doing? Like, go out and like do something. My imagination was like about to explode. So I decided to go to film school, mainly to try to bridge the gap, try to bridge a gap from like for kids like me growing up, to the arts in general, to any kind of like to speak to them and understand that there's youth out there who are hungry and passionate and need, like they're starving for connection. And a lot of the times their parents don't truly understand that, though they grew up in it. So really, like my thing was I was going to start, originally it was supposed to start writing books, but I'm like, well, when I was a kid, I didn't read books. So I'm already like missing the audience that I'm really intending on engaging. But then it was like movies. Like I've always loved movies. Movies were like one of my ways to connect. So that's like, that was my focus. I was doing that for a bit. I still am. I'm actually working on something now, but once I started at Makla, it really opened me up to just the arts. I started taking a lot more analog photos, which like on using film, and I started painting and drawing a lot more. But for me, art was always about expression. It's like ways for myself to reflect and express things that I can't exercise in real life. And being a person from an underserved area and not truly being understood, or feeling like how I perceive the world as being wrong, all those things bottle up inside of you, and they kind of like start to like disable you almost. So to be able to bridge that and to speak to those youth were like highly like important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great. I think you touched on something really important, where that's exactly what To Be Honest is trying to do too, where it's such a hard topic sometimes to talk about, especially in different communities. It's not the easiest subject, and there's a lot of taboo around it. But if there's a way to express yourself on those topics or about those topics in a way that's kind of more comfortable for people, I think that's awesome. And that's one of the reasons we started our art contest, was to give people a way to express themselves. So I definitely understand where you're coming from. But yeah, I think that's great that you're also giving back to your community in a sense. Like you saw the need when you were growing up, and you're kind of giving that to people, to youth now. So how does DMC Studio address mental health?
I think it's kind of how I mentioned before, where it's understanding like firsthand by like walking in their shoes. A lot of them are similar to me, like how I was raised and how I like was brought up. The culture that we come from hasn't really changed that much. So it's just trying to really like, it looks as though I might not do a lot from time to time, but a lot of that time is really spent just reflecting and really trying to like, think about I mean, there's like the big picture, like the youth in general, but then even specifically like one-on-one, like, I'm somebody who is kind of hard on myself. Like I'll always look at what I didn't do right. So I'll look at the youth that I couldn't really engage with, or like the issues where things did go wrong where I can fix. But I've been learning to also, don't just reflect on the times that it did go well. But really it's that, it's not really taking myself too serious or the situation too serious, and not like thinking that because I'm in this position that I know everything, that, I created this environment and this is what it's like. It still is that, like, I still create like this environment for the youth, for the studio, and I'm very intentional with my choices, but I understand too that it's not truly my space, it's their space. So I constantly have to reflect on the dynamic, like how they utilize the space, how do they interact with each other, where they go to interact with each other, what they're interacting with. But it's really just taking them into like extreme like focus with making my choices and understanding that like it's not easy, development isn't easy. Working with youth is not easy at all. And though the victories are really high and they make everything worth it, it's understanding that it's not always like good times. It's not always positive. Like there are like moments where, it feels like what am I doing? But then same with the youth, like there's days where they're just not wanting to do anything. And that's like, I understand that. I didn't understand it at first, because I have responsibilities, but it's really just being mindful of them and understanding that they're human beings and they have emotions and they come into our space having to deal with who knows what, and just being patient with them.
Yeah, and that's really great. It's almost like a learning process on both sides.
Yeah.
And you're growing and evolving together, which I think is really cool. I mean, I think that's the way it will be the most successful, is really listening to the youth and hearing from them and really taking that to heart and implementing the things that they want into the program. So it's really cool. During COVID times, how have you guys adjusted?
I think we really so before COVID started, I was already thinking about doing like video tutorials or some kind of digital, like using like a digital platform to do like workshop videos. So it kind of just gave us the full opportunity. Like I had full support from my directors and colleagues. Like, yeah, like let's do it. And so I took 8 weeks to make like a different tutorial every week, mainly focusing on like cell phone camera, like photos. Again, having to be like very specific and intentional with each choice, like understanding that what do youth have to make with, to create with. Most youth don't have money to like buy apps and spend on different things. So trying to make things as accessible as possible. So we did that for 8 weeks from like mid-March probably until like, I think it was like the end of May, because around that time, like the youth are focusing solely on, they were given packets to do. So they're really stressed out. Like they had to finish all these packets before like the end of the school year, I guess. And some were graduating. So it's typically like a crazy time in general. So we kind of made sure to check out like around that time. We ran a 2-week video production workshop. It was like the end of July, early August, and that was in person, but only up to 12 youth, and that was also successful. So once we're able to reopen and relaunch the TTC, we'll have a better I'll have a better understanding of what it'll take to like roll out a hybrid model of in person and digital or remote like learning and engagement.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like you guys have adapted pretty well. I know when we first kind of went into shelter in place or lockdown, we thought it was like temporary. So it sounds like you guys kind of had a longer term plan with the 8-week tutorial and then doing like the the in-person small group sessions. That's really cool.
Yeah, my favorite thing is planning. Like I love to plan. I love to like look out at a calendar and just put things together because that puts my mind at ease and I could focus on a bunch of other different things. So, I mean, it was something that I wanted to do before. And because I like the whole year was already kind of planned out, it was just rather than engaging one on one, it's just me having to engage with like my cell phone. um, so I mean, yeah, I think the whole video, like film production side of it, you have to be adaptable. You have to be just willing to move really quick and pivot. So that definitely helps out a lot too.
I also wanted to talk about your experience as a art curator for Emo Kids of Color Art Collective. So would you mind talking a bit about what that is?
Yeah. So for a while I was like editing kind of what is it? Like in like event videos for like corporate like people and entities. And that really just burnt me out. You know, like I see like video or movies or film as an art form, and to focus on the corporate aspect to it, like I don't know, it was just really just taking a lot out of me. So I really had, yeah, I really had to pivot from that and just kind of like start off with something else. When I started at Makla, I started in like May 2018. And like partway through, like during that summer, I found out that my youngest nephew had, he was diagnosed with, like a growth on the stem of his brain. And that really that I don't know, it was a really dark moment for like for me and my family. um and me with being somebody that's always like when things start to get dark is when I start to think about like mortality or like people in my life like that. So that really just made me just like stop, you know, like emotionally it was just like a real like big focus point of me personally. um but I think, you know, when something like that happens and being challenged like throughout my life, um you know, optimism and faith is like something that has been able to get me out of a lot. So I think understanding that and understanding that like I do have a choice to like where my focus is. And usually when I focus on this stuff, I become like healthier. I feel healthier, and it's trying to be like to show that kind of resiliency to my family and even to like the community too. I think that's why it was such a hard moment for me, because I felt defeated. I felt like that's it. Like, you know, I can't handle anymore. Um, so I think just being fried, but then also like trying to stay focused and finding faith and just having like that energy, like focusing my energy on that. Um, I believe in manifesting, and I believe in like I do have faith, and I think it usually navigates me. It like calls me in different directions. And you know, around that time we had an artist at Makla. His name was Carlos Rolón, and he came into the youth space. Like when I first found out, I had to take like a week off because I couldn't be present. I couldn't be around the youth because my energy, like I'm not good at hiding my energy, really. So you know, so I just had to really just take time with my family. So he was in there, I was in there with him, and they were showing him around, and he kept telling me that I reminded him of his friend Barry, and I'm just like, okay, like I don't know if that's a compliment or not. But my colleague was like, you don't know who Barry McGee is? And I'm just like, well, I've heard of him. Like, I'm not really like at that time I wasn't into arts in general. I was more into filmmaking and movies and cinema. So like as soon as I got home, like I Googled him and I just like, you know, I'm very curious by nature. So I just did a deep dive of everything. And, you know, immediately I saw him, I was like, okay, I see what he was talking about. But then even his mannerisms too, I'm just like, this is really odd, but also very liberating because, in the position I'm in, and even like my role at large in the community, personally, I could like kind of get down on myself or just think that I need to be a specific, like, I guess really conventional. If I wanted to be able to, do this for the rest of my life, I have to change elements of who I am. But seeing Barry McGee and how he is and how he just like, how who he is, and how he's gone through everything he's gone through and he's still like that, that was very liberating for me, and saying that I don't need to change those elements of myself. Like those elements of myself are what make me who I am. And that's something else that I try to project onto like our youth. But with Emo Kids of Color, like it kind of came from that. It came from everything that was happening with my nephew, with running into Barry McGee, but then also seeing how um, his like wife partner years ago, like right when they were kind of building and coming up, she was diagnosed with cancer when she was pregnant and ended up like passing away, but choosing to do that to be able to give birth to her daughter, and seeing how he, like all that energy that was going on, like he took it, and rather than like folding and rather than crumbling like a lot of people might, like it like catapulted him, to be able to do very like prominent things, and not thinking about it on like a business level or anything like that, but just like the work that he was doing, it's very engaging, and just like I've been able to see some of it in person, and just like feeling that energy coming from it, and wanting, I think for me personally, it was seeing that, connecting with it completely, like 110%, and having that help me get out of what I was going through personally. But then for myself, always wanting to like give it back. I think at a young age, I remember watching The Sandlot. I don't remember the quote, but it is like it went back to mortality, and you know, just wanting to change the world, or any kind of like aspect to the world. Like when I die, when I move on, I want to make sure that I did something, accomplished something, even if it was small. Like there was proof that I was alive and living. Um, so with Emo Kids of Color, that's a big part of it. Like if I wasn't going through any of that stuff, if I never met Carlos Rolón, like it probably wouldn't exist. But what Kids of Color really is, it kind of stems back further to being a youth and feeling creative, and always feeling like I was like a creative person, but never having like that sense of community, or at least like not seeing myself in museums, or not seeing myself like as in that culture, because I think typically in those underserved areas, one of the first things that is taken away or taken out is usually the arts. And I don't want to get into any kind of like theories or anything, but that's just a fact. Like that's usually what leaves, that's what happens, and people in those communities are left without ways to cope, and without ways to exercise their emotions and their feelings, and that usually ends up with them doing negative things or not being able to express themselves. So it's wanting to create like a platform for that, or at least like create community around that. It's not about like any conventions at all. It's really just about the engagement. I could have waited until I felt like I was ready to start putting on like exhibits or art shows, or like I could have waited until I felt like it was the perfect time. But I think because what was happening at home, like there's no perfect time. We don't know how much time we really have. But then also like, the projection of what it means to like be from those underserved areas in the mainstream level, it's usually like it's not a good image really. And people that come from there are usually doing everything they can to get out of there, or they're there and they aren't really proud of where they come from. So with the art that we put out, or that I put out specifically, it's to challenge that. A lot of it's reclaimed art. A lot of it's saying like, it's not about perfection. It's not about beauty, because what is beauty? You know, there's a standard in our mainstream of what beauty is or what art should look like, but all those things have been dictated to us. And I'm in the belief that I'm not going to be dictated to. Like for me, what's valid and what's like valued and what's important is like the authenticity, you know, of someone, the realness, and like the energy that comes from it. Like the paintings that I saw and felt, I could feel it. You know, like I don't gravitate to things because they're perfect or because they're neatly done. I gravitate to those things because I feel the emotion that comes with it, the energy that comes with it, and the narrative they're trying to tell, the stories they're trying to tell. So it's really trying to work with other artists. Like whenever we go to a different like city or whatever, or whenever we do a different show, it's working with artists that I don't know what connects me to them, but something does, and I try to like, you know, give them something like an opportunity to do something with us. Usually they're people that haven't really done a lot or might not have been a part of a lot of other stuff, but it's really opening the door for them, and more so like, I guess, artists who don't have a traditional background, or they don't really come from like any real sense of like privilege. They kind of just, they might draw on their notebook when they're like on their lunch or something, you know, like, I went to film school, but I didn't go right away. Like I had to work. I had to wait till I had an opportunity and I could actually go, like successfully go. And even then, I don't know, like it's really hard for me to just, you know, completely, you know, trust, I guess, like the institutions. But so definitely it's, you know, EKC or Emo Kids of Color, it's solely like the intention is to engage underserved people in general, and teaching them to, hopefully liberating them to just start creating, to start like taking the stuff that you're bottling up and just putting it out there. It doesn't have to be good. Nobody has to see it, but it's so powerful to be able to exercise those things.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like you said so many powerful things right there. But I really like the idea of you giving youth the opportunity, even if they don't feel like maybe confident in what they're doing, but it's just an opportunity to get them to express themselves and get their art out there, because you never know what could happen. It could open the door for them in some other way, which is awesome. How many art shows have you had so far with Emo Kids of Color?
So we've only been around for maybe a little over a year and a half. I can't, like, that whole time period to now, especially now, like time is just like, I don't really lost all track of it. We have been able to do somewhere around like, probably not 10, but somewhere in that span of like 5 to 10. We started to do a lot more, and then COVID hit, and there was like things that we had lined up. But we've been able to have shows, like we've had a few exhibits in San Jose, locally. We had a show in Monterey and a show in Fresno, and we were planning on kind of doing a whole, like expanding that region a little bit wider, going a little further up north, a little further south, and probably going back out to like the Fresno area. That's kind of like the area that I grew up in. But it's usually looking at those same, like going back and like for myself and thinking about writing books initially. I'm like, well, why am I going to write a book when I didn't read books really? So for ourselves, when we go out and we look at areas to have the exhibits in, it's like, why am I going to have a show for these people at this place when they don't go to that place? So I have to like be very specific and think a lot about where I'm able to find those people. And usually it is in more subcultural areas, or usually it's in really public spaces. But even just recently, we had a show at Create TV, and that was an opportunity where they are an institution and they do work with all people, but it was an opportunity for us to bring in like community that isn't really engaged with them, and that was like really successful. So I think even moving forward, it's not a matter of like we don't want to go to these places. It's like it always goes back to the energy and when we meet with the people, and if we vibe with them and if we really connect with them, I'm always willing to like collaborate. But there are times where it's just like, no, like this doesn't feel right. Yeah.
So do people usually reach out to you? Like if they're maybe interested in showcasing their art, is it they usually reach out to you? Or are you constantly on the lookout for local artists, or how does it usually work?
It's a little, well, no, I would say it's more me. Like I do, like I watch and I observe a lot, and I have a lot of friends in the art community and like colleagues and people that I really look up to. I don't know for myself. I don't know why I am this way, but I don't have any issues going out and just like doing something, like I get really motivated that way. I think I get really anxious and nervous those moments leading up to it, and have reservations about it. But I think because I'm very intentional with the choices that I make, that every time that I go and I do those things, despite whatever feelings I have leading up to it, that it's always impactful. Even like it's not like there's no real way to measure it. It's all always back to those feelings and energies that I get while doing it that make it that way. And I think that's why, it's experiencing it and wanting to share those feelings and emotions with people that like I surround myself with, like people that like it, I don't know. Before I worked at Makla, I worked at an elementary school in Stanford, and I was like, I had time to draw more, and that's when I started really drawing more. Because before, like, I wouldn't, uh, and I would draw, and like the kids that I would work with, they're like, "Oh, you're so good," and they would I could see them not wanting, like, getting like that self doubt, of not wanting to do it or just like kind of giving up, and I just would have to constantly tell them that the only reason why I'm able to do this is because I drew a lot. Like I draw a lot, and if you continue to draw, you'll get better. And and seeing those kids understand that and adapt to that and use that and continue to allow themselves to grow. There's people in the underserved areas who have to forfeit, creating and exercising things like that on that level. And for a lot of people in those areas, there's no room to really make a mistake. Like if you make the wrong choice, if you mess up, if you fail, that could really cost you. And I think that's even more reason for people to try to create. We had this little like zine workshop thing on the east side, and a lot of the older generations, they didn't understand it. They're like, "So you just want me to draw something?" I'm like, "Yeah." Some really loved it, and some kind of just like no, like it's really hard for people in those areas to like tap into their emotions or even think critically about like their lives. Yeah, I think that was even like one of the questions, like the connection to the mental health, and the people in the underserved areas. I don't know. I understand it because coming from there, I had family members that who would like see me drawing or writing at a young age and question my sexuality for doing it, even like the community in general. It's understanding for myself how incredibly important it is for me to be healthy, and then seeing how like people in my own family even can't do it, and it's disheartening. But that's the reason why it's important for me to continue to do what I'm doing, is to try to, I mean, to educate. I think that's a little like I feel pompous or something by saying I'm trying to educate you. Like no, like it's just being an example, and really like not taking myself serious and just being that example on like who I am and how I live my life and where I'm at in my life. And people tend to ask questions and people are drawn to like why I am the way that I am, but really it kind of comes back to just that ability to like surrender a lot of emotions and feelings through art and through like different mediums. It really creates like a peace of mind and it connects you to yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of touched on maybe how we can transition into our next topic of the importance of mental health within the Latinx community. So you kind of mentioned that there is, I would say, a stigma around mental health, but maybe you can talk about why you think that there's a stigma around mental health in the Latinx community.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the quality of life, like for a lot of, I mean, it's kind of complicated. Even like the terms and the phrases or like categorying, I guess, people. Like privilege isn't really like a color of skin. Like privilege, it's like a spectrum. Like people come from privilege from all over the world. It's not just like these people. So that's why when I talk about it, I specifically say like underserved people, because there are also underserved people from all kind of like spectrums of skin colors or like where they come from. With emo kids of color though specifically, because I can't speak on something that I don't know, but as growing up as a person of color, and having to deal with emotional or mental health issues, I grew up in an area that was taught like, if it isn't bleeding or broken, just walk it off. So, I mean, that's one element to it. But I think specifically in underserved areas, people are solely focused on like that moment of having to provide for their family. Like, they don't have time to think about how they feel physically, even if it like, there could be something ailing them physically, but because they have to go to work to provide for their family, they don't even think about it. They don't even try to like, handle that situation. And the same could be said about people's mental health, because they're so focused on the day to day, just surviving and just providing for their family. They don't have any time really to think about how they're feeling mentally or things that are challenging them or any kind of conflicts that they're having to deal with mentally. And that goes back to the quality of life. So I see it's not even a matter of like which generation you come in on. I think it's a matter of just like, it kind of comes back to privilege. Once you're able to kind of take a step back and think about where you're at, and if you are happy with your life, or when you start reflecting and just thinking about yourself and your own like state, then you become conscious of a lot more things. So I see people in those areas with like better quality of life who are a little bit more evolved when it comes to this area, because they've had a lot more time to like manage it, but then they've also like they've have a lot of more time to just like understand what it means to live and to have a happy life and to feel happy and joy. And I think a lot of the reasons why those things aren't like reciprocated in the underserved areas is because it's so in the moment. And these newer generations of like youth and adults who have had to like take a step back and wonder like more about like the American dream and if it's sustainable, if it's sustainable for themselves, and if it's even worth it. For myself, getting a job where I was able to provide for myself and ultimately finding out that it's not going to make me happy. Like I was able to make a lot of money and buy a lot of stuff that wasn't making me happy. So I had to find something that made me happy, but that was only because I had enough privilege to, like find that out for myself. So within the underserved areas, there is a stigma around it because they truly don't understand what it means. For them, there's so much to deal with day to day that to think about yourself is like a privilege. to wonder or to have any kind of like mental health issues or situations, that's a privilege to them, because they're just like, I mean hearing parents, having parents like, why are you crying? Like, why are you so sad? Like, you don't have anything to be sad about. Like, you have a house, you eat, like, if anybody should be sad, I should be sad because I have to work like two jobs. And you know and it's something that I could smile about, but it's something that's incredibly sad, because for some families, for some people, like, they might not ever feel fully or be like fulfilled. They'll never have that sense of happiness. And maybe it's just a changing of generations, where to them, to be happy, to be fulfilled, is just to provide for their families. And they've given enough to us that we can, you know, we can grow from that. We could do better than that, and we should be doing better than that. But what happens in these communities is that's not the case. Usually, there's bad habits, there's toxic habits, and it is that goes on from generation to generation. You're inheriting these toxic bad habits, and hurt people, and that's why I feel like those areas can never fully develop. Those communities can never fully develop. Those neighborhoods couldn't truly develop because there's so much toxicity within each household, and they don't truly like understand mental health. They don't see it as being like a real issue. It's just like, just cheer up, just get up, like, be happy, like, don't cry. I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you touched on privilege, but then another layer on top of like the privilege of just being able to take care of yourself is like finding the resources in your community that if you do recognize you need assistance, like it's even harder to get help once you recognize that. So I think it's even a privilege to find professional help or find assistance during those times. So
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
so many layers there, but yeah, thank you for touching on that. I really appreciate it. Um, do you feel like there's something that the Santa Clara County community could do better to address behavioral health within Latinx communities?
I think it comes back to accountability and being like occupying spaces. For myself, like, my parents separated. I went to a school that the environment was really bad. Like, the kids, like, there's no such thing as like bad kids or bad people, but that environment was really I went there, I got in a fight, I was ditching classes, I had Saturday school, like all this, like that was all stuff that never happened prior. Like, prior, I was in team sports, I was in marching band, like I was a pretty active, like, I would feel like a positive like student. And going there, it completely changed. So my mom and the staff was like, what's going on? So they gave me like a person to talk to, or like a counselor once a week. But I think, again, coming from those areas, it's really hard for us to open up. It's really hard for us to express things, but also receive any kind of like support, for one, because then it's like, I don't know how it's inherited, and I don't know if I've even been told this, but it's just like, it feels like it reflects poorly on our families and our parents if we need help and ask for help. So it's something that can't just be like a one-off thing. It can't just be like, oh, we'll hold one event like a year or like twice a year, and that's us engaging this community. Like, no, like that's not successful in any way. Like, it has to be very consistent in order for like the county to improve their relationship with that community. You have to tackle it, you have to address it, and you have to get in there and be consistent with them. And that's more or less like where I see my role in the youth space. I could have this idea, and I could think of myself and how I'm able to successfully like navigate things, and just put that into a space, create this environment, be like, okay, well, I did all I could. I created these programs, and it is what it is. And if they don't like it, then I can't do anything about that. But choosing to truly engage and be present and active with us, like a community, that's really where things start to change. And I think that's what because we're it's complicated, you know. It's hard for us to trust people. It's hard for us to be vulnerable. That's probably like one of the hardest things for like underserved people, a person to do, is to be vulnerable, and to expect underserved people to just do that off the bat and just start talking about their problems. It's impossible, like for a lot of people it feels like. So you have to build those relationships. You have to be in there consistently.
Mhm. Definitely. I think that's such a good point. Yeah. It's not just, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like there are programs that are created or events that are targeted towards underserved communities, but it's like a one-off
Yeah.
kind of situation. It's like you have to be present, you have to connect with the community in order to make change happen.
Mm.
So that's really important. I guess we can move on to more general questions about mental health, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What advice would you give to someone experiencing mental health issues right now?
Um, I would say that there is no wrong solution, really. Like any way that you could exercise things is like like in a well, any way you could exercise it is good. Um, when I was a freshman, there was a lot going on at home. There was a lot going on socially. Just like being a teenager in general is tough. So to like with everything that was kind of going on in my life, and trying to, just smile through it, and just trying to not let anything out, or trying to like, you know have this like trying to not be vulnerable, ultimately led to me having a heart attack at like, I think I was like 14 at the time. And I think in that moment, I told myself, like, I can't go back there. Like, I can't let that happen to myself again. And my goal for myself for the future was just try to be happy. By 18 years old, I just want to be happy, and whatever that means, like I gave that to myself. Um, and I think that's something that I still am challenged by, but ultimately, like, reflecting is really important for yourself to understand that, like, in that moment, that is a moment, and moments change and things cycle out, and there'll probably be a moment like that happens again. But to understand that it's just a moment, like, this isn't the end of the world, has always helped me. But I think just finding ways to exercise them, and that means anything. Right now, I'm on the kick of just like mind, body, and what is it? Like, there's sorry, I'll mention the mind, body, and soul. Like, trying to cleanse those things, trying to like detoxify like everything. From food, like trying to eat healthier has helped me out. It makes me feel happier. Exercising helps me out a lot. It gets rid of a lot of like energy, or like negative stored energy, and then creating too. Like it all helps. And I think it's baby steps. Like, maybe you can't control what you eat, but you can go out and just like run around. You could just go for a walk. You could do push-ups, or just like just get your blood flowing, and get like some of that energy out. Same thing with creating. I think the convention, like, oh well, I need resources, I need tools in order to create. Like, no, like, smash that. Like, don't even think about that anymore. Like, if you have anything to create with, just use that. Like, don't limit yourself, don't stop yourself, just create, and just start drawing. And you don't have to know what you're going to draw. And if you're barely starting off, whatever you're going to draw probably will suck, and it's going to suck until you do it for a matter of time. And even then, you might never like it, but it's not about if you like it or not. It's about just doing it. And yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Like, I like that you touch on taking things in baby steps. I think a lot of times we think of we have to be perfect at like whatever we do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to, reflect on the fact that we can start off not so great and we will improve. Like, we're not going to stay stagnant forever. We'll definitely improve with baby steps over time, but it doesn't have to, and it's probably not going to happen immediately. So
Yeah.
I think that's really good advice.
Yeah. That goes back to like film school and having those expectations for yourself, because it is a big process. It takes a lot of work to just make a 2-minute thing. but there's a lot of fear there. But the same thing with Emo Kids of Color. I think, as I mentioned before, I wasn't going to limit myself. I wasn't going to prolong this thing, like with mortality and not knowing how much time we truly have. I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be that example that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to put in all these hours to do it. You could just do it and let that be the example, and you could let that be the message, and I feel like that's truly liberating when somebody understands that, but then also understands how there are so many people out there that are limiting themselves of doing anything, of like finding joy, of feeling joy, because they don't think that they're ready for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's all about taking that leap, and it seems like the passion is there for you. And I'm sure if anyone else is listening and has some kind of passion that they're kind of like waiting or hesitant to kind of, take a leap on, I think if that passion is there, that's all that matters. It's what you love, it's what you do, it's who you are. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, it's scary. I'm not gonna lie. It's always scary. It's always going to be scary. But I think usually those hold like the biggest rewards, and just challenging yourself. It's a challenge. It's not easy. But that's when you start connecting with yourself and just, finding that inner confidence to do things.
Absolutely. What's something you do every day to take care of your mental health?
I see, like with planning, I get fixated on like plans for myself. So I have to wake up early. I can't wake up in like the midday, or if I wake up at 10 o'clock, I'm already depressed. I'm like, dang, like the whole morning's gone. Like I love mornings and I love evenings. I don't really care too much for the midday. So I have to wake up early. I have to get a vanilla oat latte from whatever cafe is near me.
That sounds good.
Yeah. I have to do that. I have to listen to music. That usually helps, but it's intention. Like I can't listen to any music. I can't listen to music that's like angry or aggressive in the morning, because then that's going to affect me the rest of the day. So I try to listen to just more, like I'm fine with sad music. I love listening to sad music because it just allows me to exercise feelings and emotions. But it's that. So I'll wake up, listen to music. The bad habits that I do have is going on your phone and looking at social media. So I'm trying to limit and pivot as much as I can from that. I think even that, like, that's a whole other conversation. But I got a Peloton bike, so I try to ride at least 5 times a week, and that really keeps me active, and I feel healthy just by doing that. But I think a big part of it too, during COVID, I like to have my alone time. Like I'm like a empath where I feed off of people's energy, and I give off so much energy in public spaces, even if I'm not active or like the center of attention. So I do need time alone, but I think spending so much time alone in my room was like starting to make me all paranoid and stuff. It was bad for my mental health. So just finding time and opportunities to socialize in person helps out a lot, and just connecting with friends and having that, like, it's not a matter of having a lot of friends. It's more like that inner circle, that circle of friends that like are beneficial to you and your mental health, like even if it's just one person that you can talk to that validates your feelings and emotions and perspective, like that's really like, that's a lot for me personally, for my mental health, like having people to talk to that understand me and validate those things, because then I don't feel like I'm going crazy and I don't feel like I'm like paranoid or losing my mind, because that happens. I feel like most people deal with, those feelings.
Yeah, I feel like this time can be and has been isolating for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I know for me, I'm a super introvert, but even I need social interaction. Yeah. That's what I learned during this time. I was like, after like 5 months, I was like, oh, I'm thriving, I'm doing well. And then after that, I was like, I think I need to see another human being. Mm-hmm. Outside of my household. So definitely we've learned a lot about ourselves during this time. That's for sure. What's the best part or best parts of your jobs at DMC Studio and Emo Kids of Color?
I think it's the engagement, because that's where, again, like the social interaction. Like I need my time and my space to reflect and to connect dots and to plan, and I find fulfillment in that. But until I have that engagement, and not until I get put into action like that, am I truly able to like have those practices come out, like to use my thought and use my opinion and use everything that I'm building and see where I'm at, with Makla and working in the youth space there. I have like an idea of what it takes to hold space for youth. And that's a big part of like the youth's input and part of like what I think needs to be put together as like an adult who grew up in a similar fashion. But a big part of that is holding the workshops and learning from them. Like there's so much fulfillment there with when it is successful and you can interpret things and see those things pan out through the experiences of youth. Like that's probably like, it's probably like the best feeling ever. That same exact feeling can be said for Emo Kids of Color, to be alone with your emotions and your feelings and to put that out into a movie or a painting or even through like photos, which I do. Like there's a lot of hesitancy like there. There's a lot of vulnerability there, but one thing that I tell myself is like the only way to get through a situation is to go through it. You can't, not only that, but even for myself, like I suffer from a lot of things from my past, and you can't outrun your past. In order to deal with your past, you have to go back. You have to deal with those things and manage those things in order to move forward. So with my artwork, it's the same way, where I get very personal. When I first started film school, like I just thought about being creative. Like I could be successful, I could have fun, I could do this by being creative and not really addressing anything personally, not addressing anything socially, just by being creative. And I found out very quickly that that's not the case. In order to be successful at creating, you have to be incredibly personal with what you're creating, and it has to be authentic and it has to come from a real place, I feel. So my joy with Emo Kids of Color is seeing how personal I can be, how much of myself I could put onto something and see if that resonates with people. And when it does, again, like that's like the ultimate joy. Like that's the best feeling ever. I was a part of a showcase at my film school, and I was only there for like 3 years, and I didn't submit it until my last year, or I didn't submit anything to my last year. But my intention was like a goal for myself was to be a part of the film show. So to get in was like a big success for me, and I felt really like powerful and able. But then came all the feelings of like anxiety and emotions that people are going to see this now, and you're going to be in a room with people that are seeing this, and what if nobody understands it? What if nobody gets it? So that whole entire time leading up to the showing of it was like walking on eggshells almost. But being in the room, being in the theater, and hearing people positively receive what you're working on, something that you're so personal about, again, that alone is reason enough to do it.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like both professionally and personally, it sounds like you've kind of found your groove and found what you really love to do, which is really cool to see. And I think you're probably a great role model for a lot of youth in our community. So yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Before you go, I just wanted to ask, where can people go to learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
Right now, it's mainly on Instagram. So if you type in Emo Kids of Color, it should direct you to our Instagram page. My specific page, which I'm not too active on, is _ SPNGE. It's sponge, but like some words cut out because it's been taken already. Yeah, so mainly through those things, I'm pretty active on in general. And if we do have stuff we're doing, it's there. We are working on a website right now that we wanted to have done by now, but it's hard to wrangle up artists and have people ready.
Understandable.
Yeah,
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again. And hopefully we can chat again soon.
for sure. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
If you were able to join us for the whole episode, thank you so much for listening. We are so grateful to have you and hope you choose to keep listening as we continue to share stories from youth and young adults in Santa Clara County. If you would like to learn more about To Be Honest and our podcast, please visit tobehonest.today. Our website has everything from mental health education to an online screening tool, resources, and so much more. And if you are interested in being a guest on the podcast and would like to share your own experience with behavioral health, please email us at tbh.today@gmail.com. We also have all of this information in the show notes, so we hope to talk to you soon. Bye.